I don't usually buy furniture from estate sales. I'm more of a scroll online and hope it fits kind of person. But last spring, I was driving through a small town after visiting my sister, and I saw this hand-painted cardboard sign stuck in the grass. Estate sale, 1 day only. I figured why not. I had time to kill. The house looked old but in a charming way. Big porch peeling paint, the kind of place that probably had stories baked into the walls. Inside, it was the usual mix of things people collect over a lifetime. Mismatched dishes, framed photos of loved ones, stacks of books with cracked spines. Nothing unusual. But in the dining room, pushed against the far wall, was this small wooden wine cabinet. Dark wood, maybe walnut. 2 doors with little brass handles. It wasn't fancy, but it had a quiet presence. Like it belonged somewhere important. As I was looking at it, I saw, just for a second, a shadow wisp right past it. Not a shape, not a person. More like a sudden dimming of the light, but only around the cabinet. I blinked and it was gone. I told myself the lighting in the house was bad. When I asked the woman running the sale how much it was, she hesitated. She stared at it, then back at me, like she was deciding something. Finally, she said, "If you want it, you can take it. Just..." "I'm not carrying it," she said while staring at it. She wouldn't touch it. I should have taken that as a sign looking back at this situation. I paid $40, wrestled it into my car, and drove home. For the first few days, nothing happened. I put the cabinet in my living room near the window, cleaned it, polished it. It looked good there. My dog Murphy disagreed. He's a big golden retriever, friendly to a fault. But the moment I brought the cabinet inside, he froze in the doorway, ears back, tail down. He wouldn't step into the room. I figured maybe it smelled weird to him, old wood and dust. Dogs pick up on things, energy, smells. But then I started noticing the smells too. They came in waves, sometimes ammonia, sharp enough to sting my eyes. Sometimes something floral, like old perfume. And once, something that smelled like decaying fruit. I checked everywhere. Under furniture, behind vents, nothing. I told myself that old wood absorbs odors. Maybe temperature changes bring them out. Old houses do weird things. That explanation worked, for a while. A week after I brought it home, I opened the cabinet to grab a bottle of wine for a friend who was visiting. I hadn't put anything inside yet, so I expected it to be empty except for the few aged bottles that came with it. It wasn't. Sitting on the bottom shelf was a tiny porcelain button. White, cracked, with a little chip on the edge. The kind you'd see on a child's dress from the 1940s. I didn't think much of it. Maybe it had been stuck somewhere and fell loose when I moved the cabinet. Old furniture hides things. I tossed it in a drawer and forgot about it. 2 days later, there was something else. A small brass key, thin, delicate, the kind you'd use for a jewelry box. It was lying in the exact same spot the button had been. I hadn't put it there. I live alone. I stood there for a long time, trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. Maybe it had been wedged in a crack. Maybe the cabinet had a hidden compartment. I spent an hour tapping the wood, checking for loose panels. Nothing. Murphy stood in the hallway the whole time, whining softly. The scents became more frequent after that. Stronger too. One night, I woke up around 3 in the morning to the smell of flowers. Sweet, overwhelming. Like someone had smashed a bouquet against my face. I walked into the living room, half asleep, expecting to find a spilled bottle of cleaner. But the moment I stepped into the room, the smell vanished. Not faded, vanished. Like someone flipped a switch. Murphy refused to come downstairs at all after that. He slept on the landing, staring down into the dark like he was waiting for something to move. I started keeping the cabinet doors closed, even though I knew it didn't matter. 2 weeks after I bought it, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally I ignore those, but something made me answer. A man's voice, shaky and tired, asked, "Did you buy a cabinet from my mother's estate?" I froze. I hadn't given my number to anyone at the sale. I hadn't posted about it. I hadn't told anyone except my friend. I asked how he got my number. He said, "My mother kept records of everything she sold. She wrote down your license plate." His breathing was uneven, like he'd been crying or running. He asked if the cabinet was still in my house. I said yes. There was a long, silent pause. Then he said, "You need to bring it back." I asked why. Another silent pause. Then, quietly, he said, "It wasn't supposed to be sold." I told him I paid for it, and if there was some kind of mistake, I'd like to know what was going on. He didn't answer my question. He just kept repeating, "Please, bring it back, today. Don't open it again." I hung up on him. The whole thing felt off, like a scam or a setup. But after I hung up, I realized something. I had in fact opened it again, that morning, and there were more items inside. A small wooden bead, smooth, dark, warm to the touch, and a small ball of hair, tightly wound, like someone had rolled it between their palms. I hadn't told him that. Everything about that cabinet felt wrong. The energy, the smell, the whispers I kept telling myself I wasn't hearing. I didn't sleep well after that call. Honestly, hadn't slept well since I brought it home. Around midnight, I heard something downstairs, not loud, just a soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone gently knocking on wood. I lay there, listening, trying to convince myself it was the house settling, but it kept going, slow, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. I finally got up and walked downstairs. Murphy stayed at the top of the steps whining. The tapping stopped the moment I reached the bottom. The living room was dark except for the streetlight filtering through the blinds. The cabinet was just a shape in the corner. I stood there for a long time, goosebumps rising on my arms, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did, but when I turned to go back upstairs, I smelled it again. Flowers and rot. Thick enough to taste. I turned back toward the cabinet. The doors were open. I know I closed them. I always close them. A brush of ice-cold air moved past me, toward the cabinet, like something slipping by. Inside, on the bottom shelf, was a new item, a small folded piece of paper. I didn't want to touch it, but I forced myself to pick it up. It was a photograph, a blurry, faded picture of a woman standing in front of the same cabinet. Her face was turned away, but her hand was resting on the door. On the back, written in shaky pencil, were 3 words: "Don't open it." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat on the couch with the lights on, Murphy pressed against my leg, shaking. At sunrise, I loaded the cabinet into my car. I didn't call the man back. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just drove back to that small town. The house was empty. No cars, no signs, no people. I left the cabinet on the porch and drove away without looking back. Every cell in my body screamed at me to check the rearview mirror to make sure it was still there. I didn't, because I knew, deep down, that if I looked, something would be looking back. 8 months later, Murphy goes into the living room again. The smells stopped. No more items. Life feels normal. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm half asleep, I swear I hear that soft tapping again, and faint whispers, like someone speaking through a wall. I keep telling myself it's in my head. But last week, I opened the drawer where I'd tossed that porcelain button. The very first item I found. It wasn't there. In its place was something else, a small brass key, the same one I found in the cabinet, the one I left behind. And now I can't shake the feeling that I didn't just bring the cabinet back. I brought something else home instead, something that doesn't need a cabinet anymore.